How to help an elderly relative decide when to stop driving is one of the toughest dilemmas families today face. Experts discussed the issue Thursday at an MIT AgeLab conference. They talked about the warning signs and how to have those critical conversations.
That there isn't a simple, easy test for people to use and rely on to figure out whether someone is a safe driver or not. And so we needed to give caregivers some information about what they could do to figure out, is my loved one still safe to continue driving? There are a list of driver warning signs. So there's a sheet that says, here's a list of unsafe driving behaviors, and we ask caregivers to observe their loved one over time, not sitting next to them in the passenger seat with a checklist, but just to look at the list and think about what are these signs, and then pay attention when your loved one's driving and look to see whether you're seeing any of these things. For example, going through a red light, having difficulty parking. We have a whole list, actually. There are about 28 signs. So there's a decreased confidence in driving. That's less of an issue than confusing the gas pedal and the brake pedal. That's a serious issue that should warrant immediate stop to driving.
I hear so often the statement, "I'd rather die than to give up driving." And when a caregiver of someone with dementia, whether the caregiver is a spouse, a significant other, an adult child, that person has a fear of having that discussion initially. They know the patient might say things like, "I'd rather die. You can't take my independence away." The caregiver also has to face things like having that discussion, and the next day the patient with Alzheimer's disease might not remember that they had the discussion. They also have to deal with things like the lack of insight. The person with Alzheimer's disease eventually loses insight into their own abilities. But the person with Alzheimer's disease overestimates their driving skills and drives much longer than they should.
We found that the typical caregiver response was actually one of avoidance. And in fact, 71% of the caregivers that we talked to in this early research that we did told us that their relative with dementia had driven beyond the point that it was safe. And they added that they had allowed their loved one to drive for an average of 10 months beyond that point. A caregiver told us that getting my dad to stop driving is like ripping out his heart. In our most recent research that we did in conjunction with BU, we found that while most caregivers were very concerned about their loved one either hurting themselves or hurting others, very few of them were actively monitoring the driving of their loved one.
Keep a calm, nice conversation going with their loved one that would then help them eventually make that decision. And then finally, do they know what kind of things they can do at the last resort? What are those last resort things, like removing a battery of the car or selling the car? Because as we've talked about, it's independence. And it's representing loss of independence overall. Adult children are not used to talking with their parents in a way that says, "Sorry, you can't drive."
The person has to believe that you genuinely care about them, that this is not just a public safety discussion. This is not about the effectiveness of your driving, that I care what happens to you and how you're going to get around and maintain your dignity afterwards.
This is Sue Scheibel reporting for the Patriot Ledger. For more information, see today's edition of the newspaper or go to patriotledger.com.